From a filmmaking family. His father was Max Fleischer, who was very big in cartoons. But what he really, as far as cinema making, he was the inventor of what's called rotoscoping. And it was a way of outlining a subject that you wanted to isolate from the environment they're in, that they're surrounded by. And he's the one that devised that. And that is actually the basis for computer-generated films today, even though we use digital instead of emulsion. And so he deserves a lot of credit, Max Fleischer, to achieving what we're achieving now.
My grandfather was an immigrant from, depending on which day it was, either Austria or Poland, because the border kept changing. Fleischer Studios was founded in New York and was located just off Broadway. So he produced the Betty Boop cartoon series and Popeye. And Popeye became a big hit series. And then my grandfather started the Superman cartoon series. And then after that, he was called upon to do the second feature-length animated cartoon, Gulliver's Travels. My grandfather and Walt Disney were really bitter competitors. They really were. And my father was sitting in his office one day, and he got a telephone call. And it was Walt Disney. And Walt said to him, could you come to my studio tomorrow? I'd like to have a meeting with you. My father said, certainly. And he went there, and there were all these pictures and drawings and storyboards of the Nautilus, and everything that came out of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And Walt said to my father, well, we're going to make the first 100% live-action movie that we've ever made. And it's going to be 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It'll be the most expensive movie ever made. And if it isn't a success, it will bankrupt my studio. Would you like to direct it? And my father was just astounded. So my father directed 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was a huge success. And Walt said to my father, I want you to extend an invitation to your father to come to my studio because I'd like to host a reunion between your father and all of my animators who used to work for him. And my grandfather accepted, and they had this big lunch at the studio. There's a picture right up there that shows the people at the lunch. At the head of the table, there's Max, Walt's on the left, my father's on the right, and these are the original signatures of everyone on that photograph. And as a result, the two men reconciled and became friends. And when Walt came to New York, he would call on Max. And I particularly like that story because Hollywood is known for all its unpleasant and ugly stories, and that's a particularly touching story, I think. My father was born in Brooklyn, and this is actually very interesting when you consider this in light of his body of work, because he really always wanted to be a psychiatrist. And he took all the pre-med courses that you take when you're in college. He went to Brown University. But while he was at Brown, he got bitten by the theater bug. And he went to Yale Postgraduate Drama School. And he was spotted by an RKO talent scout who said, kid, you want to come to Hollywood and direct movies? So he did. My father came to Hollywood to direct B-level movies for Sid Rogel at his unit at RKO. And he started to gain a reputation of being a hot young director and quite good. A little earlier I mentioned that it was interesting that he wanted to become a psychiatrist because my father had a real fascination with the criminal mind. It was not an obsession, but it was a fascination with it. And it's quite evident from Violent Saturday. It's quite evident from the other film noir movies that he made. And one of the great classics of his fascination with the criminal mind is a movie called Compulsion, which was the murder trial of Leopold and Loeb. The Boston Strangler, again, is an interesting thing. My father, whenever he does something that is historical, he researches it very, very, very carefully.
The Boston Strangler was the first film I did with Richard Fleischer. And I've done roughly, I think, nine or 10 films with him altogether. But I've been in the industry for 70 years. I started at age 16 and a half, right out of high school. So I know the industry well, having worked I've worked on over 130 pictures.
Sometimes he couldn't use his research because the truth would not be accepted. It would be accepted or looked upon by the audience as just a Hollywood fantasy.
We shot it as a reality film, and what happened is what happened. We kept it realism, and we actually went back to Boston, where these murders were taking place. And we, with the production designer Richard Day, who's one of the greatest that I think ever lived or was ever in the industry, the three of us went back and we spent a month and a half just retracing the Boston Stranglers' different episodes. And that way Richard had a handle, we all had a handle on a way to go.
When my father decided he wanted to cast Tony Curtis as the Strangler, he met with incredible resistance because Tony was not looked at as a particularly serious actor at that point.
I don't know if you realized it or not, but he had a fake nose. We had to put it on every day, and it gave him a bit of a mysterious look. And I think it was a very good idea. It was his idea also. I don't know if you're aware of it, but he actually sought to do the film. He actually had a nose created for him, and he could look like somebody else rather than the pretty boy that he was known to be, and the razzle-dazzle and all that. And he shot a still, and they took it to Zanuck. And Zanuck found it hard to believe at first, from what I told, but he got used to it. He said, yeah, he could do it. And after a while, that's how Pretty Boy got into the picture, that they finally accepted him. And he even developed a Boston accent, without going overboard, but enough not to make him Brooklyn like he was. He did it just right. It was really a perfect. He developed a great character. He did it, and I give him a lot of credit for it. Track and move in and out. It added excitement to the picture. Richard Fleischer, the director, his talent is throughout the whole picture.
He was a very interesting mix of almost delicacy in his emotions and his feelings, almost fragility, and great strength. His English crews nicknamed him the Iron Butterfly, and that very much characterized my father.
He's wonderful with actors. That's one of his fortes.
He had the utmost respect for actors, both on the positive side and on the negative side. He understood their art, and he knew what they had to do and how hard that was. On the other hand, he knew that many of them were insecure, and he understood why.
He doesn't disturb an actor, but he contributes. He doesn't tell them how to do it, as opposed to, he has a way of whatever he says is telling them how to do it or how we'd like to see it. But he doesn't use that wordage.
The way he would work is he would have the scene set up and have it lit and everything that needs to be done, and then he would bring the actors in to rehearse it, and he would have everybody leave the soundstage other than the director of photography, and whoever the director of photography needed there. Because he knew the actors just needed to have space and to be relaxed. I remember the first meeting he had with the crew, and he took over. He was a real general, and you took him seriously.
I like to say that I was the romantic lead in the piece because I'm the only one who lived. Not so funny in today's world, you know. Bobby Fryer was the producer, and he was a friend of mine. I don't remember why. At that time, had asked me to do it, and I was sort of young and acting student. You know, I'd done one little part in a movie with Jack Lemmon. I'd starred in hundreds of TV shows. So when he asked me, I said, no, I don't think so. You know, there's not enough to do, and blah, 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 blah. And then I had this shrink, you know, we call him in America, you know, it's a guy, you know, therapist, whatever. And he said, well, right, don't do the picture because you'll sit around and do nothing. Why don't you, you know, do the picture? So anyway, I reluctantly kind of backed into it. And I'm so glad I did the film. You know, I mean, that was my, you know, childhood arrogance, you know, that had nothing to do with anything except low self-esteem. But I wasn't going to show my breast, you know, I absolutely wasn't going to. Henry Fonda had been kind of a mentor of mine. And when I was all bruised up and bandaged, he came onto the set and said, what have you done to her? She's a pretty girl, you know, and he didn't even know I was going to be in it. And that's about all I remember is that, you know, that and that afterwards I was all bruised. And the irony of my wearing this bodysuit, you know, because I was so modest and I didn't want anybody to see anything. My next picture was MASH, you know, where I'm stark naked in a tent, you know. I mean, talk about irony. I certainly freed myself up.
Is it the best you can do?
I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you for trying.
In 1968, when my father did The Boston Strangler, the filmmaking techniques were changing. The quote, New Hollywood was getting born. He was always a very adaptable man. He was not resistant to change. He embraced any new technique.
Good vision, and he really made it to what it finally turned out to be. So the plan of attack was preconceived before we ever shot a 1 foot of film. We did testing and things like that. The medium was 1:235, a CinemaScope. And by using CinemaScope, we could get more panels, if needed, into one frame. So it was an ideal medium for us to adapt to.
It was revolutionary, not so much in that it was, you know, unknown, the technique, I believe, for effective storytelling. Normally it was used for sort of like just an effect during an action scene, etc. Here, my father, and I remember him telling me this, very, very deliberately edited the split screens in a way that would attract your attention from one screen to another because he wanted to tell a different part of the story or the story from a different angle. And so I think it was really the use of the split screen that was so revolutionary and so effective.
When we go to a film in a theater, you don't realize it, but in life itself, when I'm looking at you, I see a lot on the side. And so it's the same with the screen. In particular, the wider the screen, the more we have to shift the eyes right, left, when things happen. And so with these different panels, I learned that I had to do something to make the eyes shift from panel A to mention to, even though we're not using panels, but which part of the screen when there's actors on the right side and on the left side, and at the moment, where do you want them, you know, the eye to be, even though the eye is taking in the whole range of the screen. It was a period in filmmaking where we did not have reflex cameras. We had cameras that had a finder on the side of it, a BNC or NC. And we had mats that were, the sketches that were designed by Fred Hartman. We had computed what size mat would be put into the finder, and that would illustrate that. The reason we used the finder, we tried thinking we could put in the aperture of the camera the size, but it was too risky because you're stuck with it. And it would mask off everything else. It would look cleaner in dailies or when people are viewing it, but it was too limiting and too risky.
All right.
You'll notice it was very difficult to keep focus, and there's a lot of out of focus in that sequence, which in a way you could say it was done purposely, but it wasn't. It was just very hard to focus. You'd say, well, that added to the imagery, if you want to lie about it, but it was not done purposely. It's just very difficult to focus. It was an additive that worked for us rather than against us. Yeah.
When the Boston Strangler opened, of course, it opened to great critical acclaim. And I think a lot of people were amazed to see Tony's performance. We had a picture hanging here in this library when my father lived here, and it was a photograph of Tony Curtis in the Strangler's costume. And it said, "Dear Dick, thank you for saving my career." So Tony had a profound appreciation for my father, not just in being his champion in landing that role, but also for the way he directed him during the film. I think The Boston Strangler really was an important movie, both in my father's mind and I think in the minds of people who are students of this area.
We won't do any more today.